Bull Camper in the right place at the right time.
Joe Rose, touchdown Miami!
All right, welcome down to Pasture. Joe Rose, Kim Beaucamper, and Joe. You know, we've been around here a long time, South Florida, and I know not everyone's from around South Florida, but we've been around a lot, and there have been a lot of things that have gone around here. And you know, we've been fortunate enough to have guys that chronicle it for a long time.
Yeah.
And one of those guys that we've got is on with us today, Greg Cote. He's been a columnist for the Miami Herald for 29 years. Grew up down here in South Florida.
Seen it all.
A true Floridian guy.
Seen it all.
And seen it all. So we're fortunate to have Greg on here, and he's doing a podcast with himself. He's got his own podcast. Does a podcast with Dan Lebitard and that crew over there. Joining us now, Greg Cote, and you talk about a Florida-born guy, South Florida. Where'd you go to? MacArthur High School is where you went?
Yeah, Hollywood, Florida, MacArthur High School. Yep.
There's a guy that never left home.
Never
right
left,
there,
huh?
man. When we say South Florida, Greg Cote, you are South Florida.
Oh, I'm about as now. I wasn't born here. I was born in Massachusetts, and my family moved down here when I was about 2 years old. But I can make an argument that I'm as South Florida as anybody. In fact, my father and I were in the Orange Bowl for the very first Dolphins game in 1966.
Wow.
I know a lot of people probably claim that, but trust me, there were only about 20,000 people in the building. But my dad and I were one of them. So yeah, I'm definitely a South Florida guy.
Greg, you know it's amazing. We were talking before, and it's hard to imagine. It doesn't seem that long ago to us that it was just all about Canes football and the Miami Dolphins, and now we got all kinds of stuff going on here in sports.
I think it's one of the most vibrant sports cities in America. I really do. Not always the most successful, and we keep waiting for the Dolphins' next Super Bowl. But the Heat have been sort of relentlessly winning, and I don't want to start on the Marlins because that's
a waste of time.
But as a sports town, to your point, Lionel Messi plays here. The most famous athlete in the world. I mean, doing what I do for a living, I'm in heaven. I mean, there's plenty to write about, and I just really appreciate this city, this town.
And being a Broward guy, I mean, you look at Broward now. You've got, with Hard Rock Stadium now, you've got the Dolphins obviously there. You got the concerts there. You get some soccer there. But you got F1. You got the Miami Open tennis, and so really. And then you've got the Panthers up in so everyone last year when the Panthers won the Stanley Cup, they're all going, it's a Broward championship.
Yeah, for sure.
The Panthers are a true Broward championship.
Yeah.
They played a couple games down in that Cracker Box down in Miami.
Right.
They're Broward's team.
Absolutely. And I really enjoyed the fact that the Panthers had their championship celebration right on Fort Lauderdale Beach. It was beautiful because, they're sort of far flung out there and west in Sunrise, but they're essentially a Broward team, a Fort Lauderdale team. So it was great. They're terrific. They're our winningest team right now. I mean, thank goodness for the Panthers and Inter Miami.
Hey, Greg, 30 years as a columnist for the Miami Herald. Pretty damn cool that you've been able to do it so long. Now everybody's a columnist, though. All the reporters now can give opinions, so they're not only just pissed off at sports columnists now. Everybody get mad at all your favorite writers,
Joe
right?
Opelaka's a sports columnist now.
I'm telling you what, that's sort of a running joke in the industry. Dave Hyde and I, my friendly rival, have talked about that a lot. The industry has changed, and Joe, what you said is 100% correct. When you read something Barry Jackson, for example, writes, it's newsy, but there's opinion in there, and it used to be a hard line.
Yeah.
If you weren't a columnist, I'm the only columnist per se, the only general columnist, but we have others give an opinion. You're exactly right. I don't always like that as the columnist, but it is what it is.
Yeah, but I remember, coming in early on. Look, I got here in 1976, and it was Edwin Pope, and then it was you had like the Larry Dormans, the Bernie Lynch. I tell you, some of the writers that we've had come through here, especially in those early decades of the 70s. Bernie Lincecum. I'm going to throw Ed Playstead in there only because he got thrown in the shower. But, but they really had some quality that really went on to do some pretty good things, whether it was in print, whether it was in TV and all different things, but very, very, and Edwin Pope, the dean, was great. But you always knew that his column was going to be about what he thought and what he believed, and everything else was just, stats, not stats, but just, okay, they did this, they did that, they did this, they did that. And
right.
It took me a while to figure out the difference between the columnist and the writer.
Yeah. Because and there was a clear difference at one time. The writer was just writing a game story, just the facts.
Yeah.
And the columnist was the one who said, Shula needs to be fired because they've lost 2 games in a row. Not that I would ever write that. Shula's a saint to me. And so is Edwin Pope, by the way. He's my mentor. I miss him still, a man of such integrity. But we had so many great writers at one time on the Herald staff, and I would say mid 80s to mid 90s when you had Peter Richmond, Dorman, S.L. Price, so many guys who went on to greater things than just this market. So I've been blessed to work with who I work, and a shout out to the late great Bob Rubin, who was our second columnist behind Edwin for years.
Greg, it's amazing. You're now 70 and you've been able to make the change with times. Podcast, very popular, doing a lot of stuff, doing national stuff, doing a lot of stuff with Dan Le Batard, and still doing all your writing. What's that adjustment been like from a guy that just was a great writer?
Yeah. I'm writing a little bit less. I'm probably down to 1 or 2 columns a week now instead of 3 or 4, which does make a difference. Le Batard's been a blessing to my late career. But you guys have done the same thing essentially. I mean, Joe, I'm not buttering you up, but you're a legend in South Florida radio, and Bo's name is all over restaurants. I have lunch at Bo Camper's. I rarely see him in there, but I do have lunch at Bo Camper's every once in a while. So you
where
guys
is the guy? Yeah.
I mean, you guys know what it's like. The one thing you don't want to do is fade away. You both had great careers with the Dolphins. But you're both still vibrant in the community and well known and out front, and I admire that. I admire anybody who can continue doing what they love. That's why Tony Kornheiser is one of my favorite people of all time. Yeah. He's 76. If you're older than me and still doing your thing and doing it well, you're a hero of mine. And pardon my voice, by the way.
Greg, you got to love, though, what you do. There's no way you could do all the stuff you're doing and stay up. And I know you've talked about your son and stuff, but you got to love what you do, right? To still do it at this level.
Yeah. I wouldn't unless I did. My wife happens to be a high-powered attorney who makes about 5 times what I do. I'm not doing it for the money, especially what the Herald pays me, because come on now. I mean,
I got you.
Our Herald writing staff in the heydays, we had about 35 writers. Now I think we're down to 7 or 8. But I absolutely love what I do. I love the writing part. I love the podcast part, my own podcast, not just Le Batard Show, because that's allowed me to really work with my son, both on the Le Batard Show and on our own podcast. Yeah. And that's been a joy as well.
So we've all, you've been involved in sports. We're sports guys from day one, and sports has changed. It's not, we can go back to, back in the day, but it's an ever changing. Rules change, just the way they play the games change, the way that the fans react to them, and certainly the way they're covered and everything. But it's the thing about it is, and I kind of got a couple of years ago, I got fed up with college football. When the NIL came in, when they started making the mega conferences where you got USC playing at Michigan and Oregon playing, it's like, come on now.
He got to be a grumpy old man.
I was a grumpy old man.
But
when we travel, if we travel somewhere, we get wherever we're going in the hotel on Saturday about 4:00. And that year I'm not watching any college football. I'm just pissed at it. I'm not going to. And so I go up there in the room, put my bag down, turn the TV on, and I'm watching the football game. And I'm watching the football game, and I'm going, the game is still the game.
Yeah.
The game is still the game. All that outside noise, goes away when you're watching, because I was actually watching USC at Michigan, and I'm going, well, that's really cool that USC playing in the big house, two good football teams going at it. And so it's kind of, I'm kind of that Jekyll and Hyde when it comes to the way sports is going.
Yeah, the game is still the game. You're right, but who's playing it is a revolving door in college now. I mean, if you have a freshman superstar in basketball, in men's basketball, you probably have him for 1 year and he's going to leave, or you probably have him for 1 year because he's going to transfer, and it might be his third transfer in the past 3 years because he's chasing NIL money. There's something to me a little unseemly about it. I'm not against college athletes making money, but to me, there should be a continuity to it. Schools and athletes, I think, should be limited in the number of times they can transfer or accept transfers. And I certainly wouldn't have the transfer window open in the middle of March Madness when, this past month, you literally had, I think, one player from, I think it was Michigan, I'm not sure. You had a player from a Sweet 16 team in the middle of the tournament tell his coach he's transferring. That's just, there's something wrong about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. Hey, you've covered everybody. I mean, when we talk about old names and we do the history thing on the radio or something, you've covered them all. Your favorite guy to cover, good or bad, but you always just found him fascinating, entertaining.
Oh, wow. If we're going way back to the Fort Lauderdale Strikers days in the late 70s, Ray Hudson, an Englishman. Yeah. I don't know how well you guys know him, but
no, I know Ray really well.
He's a delight to this day. I mean, he admitted to me once that if they were winning a game at halftime, he would be dreaming up fun quotes that he could say to the media after the game. Love a guy like that. I always loved covering Zach Thomas because he wore his heart on his sleeve. Man, you could just tell by looking at his face whether the Dolphins had won or lost that day. Star power is always fun to cover. The couple of years Shaquille O'Neal was with the Heat. It was fun to be in his orbit and just experience that. The same with Dan Marino. When you have players of Shaq and Marino and Lionel Messi of that stature, there's just a buzz that surrounds them. I almost can't describe it, but you guys know what I mean, and it's the same with, when you have you guys both played when you saw instantly how great Dan Marino was, 83, 84, 85. Mm-hmm. And when you experience that, whether as a teammate or a writer, you're just like, wow, what is this? I've never seen it before. Long may it live,
You speak about that. I can remember the first time, and my partner here was part of the game. I'm standing on the sideline at Shea Stadium, and Dan at the time, Dan, he wouldn't run, but he would move the pocket. He would like get out, and so he's running. He drops back, kind of gets flushed a little bit, so he starts going to his right, and he's kind of pointing right. And Joe's running a deep crossing, deep crosser,
right,
and Danny throws the football. It must have been a 30-yard pass. And he threw it on a rope. I think that ball didn't have any arc on it. There were two DBs coming in with their hands. He threw it between four hands, and Joe never had to move his arm right here like this. And he caught it, and I'm standing on the sideline, and I looked at the guy next to me, and he's looking at me like, did you see what I just saw? And by that time, I was in the league for 7 years. You'd seen everything. You figured you thought you'd seen everything you could. As soon as I saw that, I go, man, this guy is and to me, it's an honor to be standing on the sideline and seeing that,
He started great, to your point, man. He did. Boy, you hit it right on the head. Day one, David Woodley's my roommate at the time, starting quarterback on a Super Bowl team. And this rookie shows up at the end of the first round, and we'd heard all kinds of things about him, some good, some bad. And he shows up and starts throwing it. And my roommate, David Woodley, goes back, and we're in the room, and he smoked cigarettes, and he was smoking them 2 at a time. And he goes, what do you think? And I said, honestly, we had good quarterbacks at Cal. I've never seen anything like this. This guy's a different level. And he knew, he goes, it's just a matter of time. He figures this thing out a little bit on this system. He can make throws that you're not supposed to make against all these coverages for completions.
Yeah. Yeah.
David wasn't the smartest guy, bless his heart, but I mean, I'm glad where he's resting right now, but I think he saw the writing on the wall like after one day.
That was nicely put.
Yeah, I imagine he did. Pardon me. I've got asthma, and sometimes when I laugh, it brings on a cough, which is unfortunate because I really love to laugh. But the thing about Marino, you guys know he didn't start in his rookie year until around mid-season. I remember asking Shula once, what were you thinking during that first start? And Shula's answer was, why'd I wait so long? Which I thought was a very succinct answer that I appreciated. Shula, everybody thinks of him as gruff and humorless, but I found him to be pretty amusing when he wanted to be. Yeah, I don't know about you guys.
He could be. But you know what? I think I give him credit that he just didn't yank David out, because David had just took us to a Super Bowl.
Yeah.
And so it's hard to pull a guy that got you the Super Bowl. And so I think it was a little bit of loyalty to him, even though he knew
our offense was bad.
He knew automatically that this is the future, but still gave him that. So as far as beyond players, I remember when the things that have happened in Miami sports wise. You've got, especially the Orange Bowl. You had major heavyweight, major boxing matches in there. You had like Roberto Duran, you had Sugar Ray, you had all these guys. And boxing was a mecca. This was a mecca for boxing early on in the 60s and 70s. And then when I came here, it was my rookie year. I blew my knee out in the first preseason game, and went in the hospital and had certain. But then they'd keep in the hospital for like 10 days. And so I'm laying there and I'm just watching TV. So I'm watching the UM, and UM had a lot of good players on the team, but they couldn't win. They're playing on Friday nights to try to get more crowds. There's no crowds, and they're talking about cutting the sport, just trashing the sport. It's not doing anything. Let's get rid of it. And then like 2 or 3 years later, they become one of the great football stories in college football.
Yeah. That was an amazing turnaround, and that's one of the first truly big national events I covered. I think was that '83 championship that the Canes won with I remember Beverly Schnellenberger and her floor-length mink coat or something, some sort of a fur she was wearing next to the stately Howard Schnellenberger. That was a hell of a team. And but you mentioned boxing, and I'm glad you did. This was the Mecca at one point. I mean, the Fifth Street Gym, Muhammad Ali, when he was still Cassius Clay, would train there. I became pretty good friends with the late, great Ferdy Pacheco, the fight doctor, and he lived down here right off Biscayne Boulevard. And you're right, there were some great fights. I mean, national level fights at the Orange Bowl and elsewhere in town. So I miss those days. I do. Yeah. And we also used to be a bigger horse racing mecca than we've become.
Much bigger.
So
you had Hialeah going, and you had Calder going, and you had Gulfstream going.
Yeah,
lots of Hialeah to me. Hialeah to me is
what a gorgeous track.
I can't stomach it.
It's beautiful. I think of that place for all the bougainvillea, all the red bougainvillea on the walls and everything. It was pardon my phone here. You can definitely edit that out, Seth.
So when
Spoken by a professional.
Speaking of the horses, when I first came down here, the first guy that called me was Hank Goldberg. Right? Hank just called me, want to wish you, welcome you to South Florida. He says, hey, why don't you come up and meet me next Friday at Biscayne Dog Track?
Yeah.
And I go, dog track? And he goes, yeah, they race dogs. I go, oh, let me go. I'd like to check that out. So I go to meet him at Biscayne Dog Track. I get up there, and who's he got standing next to him? Angelo Dundee.
Oh yeah.
So I meet Angelo Dundee right off the bat when I come here, and at the time I was like 6'6". I was pretty fit, 245,
right,
and pretty strong. And Angelo goes, hey, why don't you quit football? I'll make you a heavyweight boxer. I said, Angelo, no. I like my nose too much
Yeah,
to
seriously.
go into that game.
Yeah, I like a face mask when other people are trying to hit me.
Yes, thank you.
But
you never knew when you were going to run into those characters.
Yeah.
And there was a bunch of them down there.
Everyone.
oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's why when we talk about what a great sports town this is, I'm not just thinking of the major teams. I'm thinking of it being such a great high school sport. South Florida is one of my best buddies is the offensive coordinator at St. Thomas Aquinas, which is a high school powerhouse down here. And it's just, the annual events down here. We have all the major golf and tennis. Tennis just happened at Hard Rock. I have some fault with Stephen Ross as an NFL owner per se, but what he's done with that stadium and everything around it, with F1 now, major tennis, it's quite a mecca, and a lot of credit should go to Ross for that.
Hey, Greg, we got to get in the juicy stuff here. It's been good so far. Shula got to everybody, player, coach, media member, chewed everybody's ass at some point. He
Right.
got everybody, either in a group or individually, but he was going to get you sooner or later if you're around. Did he ever get you?
There were a time or two. I remember, this is absolutely ridiculous. This was still when they were training at St. Thomas University, I believe. I used to, I like to have fun when I write. I don't treat sports as seriously as I should at all times. And you know how Shula's nickname, one of his nicknames was Shoes, right? Hey, Shoes.
Yeah.
I created a nickname for the nickname and started referring to him in print as the Cobbler.
How'd that go over?
So after practice one day, he gives me that low wave and, hey, can I see you for a minute? And, so we walk off together, and I'm paraphrasing here, but he says, what's that cobbler bullshit or something like that? And me having to explain an absolutely ridiculous made-up nickname to Don Shula, I felt like crawling in a hole at that point. But when I told him, he didn't even say anything. He just sort of like nodded his head and then walked off. But
you knew what he meant.
We had a good relationship. We did. I think one of my last interviews I ever did with him was shortly before he passed away, and it was at his home. And he said to me once that the first time I was in his company, it was another group of reporters around, probably 8 or 10 of us, and everybody else, I was probably in my mid-20s at this time. Everybody else is calling him Coach. Hey, Coach. Yeah. I called him Don. Not at all out of disrespect, but I'm a young adult. He's not my coach. He's Don Shula. I'm going to call him Don. Yeah. It seemed less formal than Mr. Shula, but I just wasn't comfortable calling him Coach. And he told me in our last interview, just as an aside, that he appreciated that struck him. It stood out to him, and he remembered it all those years later about me. So that was kind of cool. I had such admiration for Shula, beyond football. He, a man of impeccable integrity, just a titan in this community and certainly in the NFL.
Yeah. So Greg, when I first came in, it always during training camp, I couldn't understand. He would let all the reporters come in and go through our training table. Right? Yeah. And then you'd sit at a round table. You'd sit with him when he was done eating. Then you guys would ask questions.
Yeah.
And I thought that was, wow. And I don't know if anybody else did that, or maybe that was, what the people that Paul Brown or whoever he worked with before did it. But I'm always kind of looking at, geez, these guys just get to sit and have lunch with the coach. And, we'd see him in line, go, hey, get the hell in the back of the line, man. We're hungry,
The access we had to him, looking back on it, was remarkable. And you certainly don't see that now. The idea of a coach, mingling at a lunch table with reporters is pretty unheard of. That's another reason I like Shula. I think he had a respect for the media that you don't always get today. And he knew we were just doing our job. Even when I wrote a column he didn't particularly like, it's not like he ignored me or refused to talk to me. He was always very upfront, and I really admired him. I've admired no coach or athlete any more than I did him in my career.
Hey, Greg, so we got to get to some great columns. There's been impactful ones through the years, but I got to tell you, man, going back to 1993, like yesterday, Trade Marino column that you did. And that got everybody fired up. You talk about a reaction. Just to this day, you must still hear about it.
Oh, I do. And it's always the Trade Marino column, those three words. Yeah, I remember one of the local TV stations, might have been Jim Barry. It's been so long ago now, I don't really recall exactly, but one of the TV stations had me on, and it was such a controversial column that they pretended to, blur out my face and give me a different voice, as if I were in a witness protection program or something. I don't think Marino and I think have a fairly cordial relationship. I saw him when they opened the new training center at Hard Rock Stadium, and I've talked to him on the phone a couple more times. But I'm sure he didn't like that column, and I wouldn't either if I were him. But I've reread that column a couple of times just to figure out why it made the impact it did, and it's what I call a talking piece column.
Yeah.
I think I was just putting it out there and raising the question. At this point in his career, they weren't winning Super Bowls with him. He was still at the point in his career where he had trade value. I think there were rumors about the Raiders at the time. And so I'm just throwing it out there, maybe look into trading Dan Marino. It wasn't he's a bum, get rid of this guy.
No.
I tried to be very careful with the tone, but yeah, if I were Marino, I wouldn't have liked it either. And I went into the locker room either the next day or the day after that, because I don't like to hide from a controversial column. And when I was in the company of Marino with several other reporters, it was an extra big throng that day. I recall Harvey Green trying to monitor things like, Danny's got to get to a meeting soon. But
that's right.
I remember somebody asking Marino what he thought of the column, and his answer was, he may be right, meaning I may be right to have said. Obviously he didn't probably think that, but it was a very cordial, polite way for him to respond to that. So,
but good,
Greg, it was radio gold. So radio gold.
I mean, it's I'm not going to go crazy. It's a courageous thing to say something like that if that's what you believe, and that's really what the paper is paying you for your opinion on those types of things. And it was right. It was a hairline thing, because as many people as for Marino, there was a bunch that said, hey, because Scott had a pretty good year. Yeah. And I think he's eating all the money, literally eating all of the money that he got on his next contract from it.
He's a big boy.
You're doing fat shaming right now.
I'm doing that. I'm doing that.
You're a real fucking asshole.
I couldn't resist, man. I've been heard that before. You think that's new? You think that's the first time I heard that? He's probably called me the same thing. So.
Yeah, that money wasn't buying too many salads either.
No. Hey, so we've talked a lot about Coach Shula and really when you look at the landscape of South Florida sports, and you could say maybe Florida sports, certainly he's at the top of the hill. But we got another guy here in Pat Riley that's still chugging along, and the resume that he's brought. I think I saw something recently where he's been involved in like 24% of all the NBA finals in history.
Amazing. Yeah.
Which is when you look back as a broadcaster, as a player, as a broadcaster, as a coach, as upper management, which is a remarkable thing. And he's been another jewel for us down here for a long, long time. I didn't think he was going to spend as much time.
I thought he'd be long gone by now.
I wouldn't think he would have spent this much time with his team, but he fell in love with the team. I think Mickey Harrison is the right owner to work with him, and and what he's done down here has just been absolutely phenomenal.
Yeah, it really has. And Pat Riley, happy birthday, just turned 80 a couple of weeks
Wow.
ago. When Mickey Harrison just made the Basketball Hall of Fame, and I think the main reason he did is that he hired Pat Riley.
Mhm.
And
Yep.
to this day, if somebody asks me what's the all-time Mount Rushmore of Miami pro sports, it's an easy answer for me. It's Shula, Marino, Riley, and Dwayne Wade. And Riley, the Heat, the Dolphins have gone through a long spell. Maybe they're coming out of it now a little bit. They've went through a long spell of not winning, as you guys know as well as anybody. The Heat really hasn't gone through that long spell of not winning. They've been a relentless winning franchise since their birth, really, other than the first few years, obviously. So that's most of that is Pat Riley for sure.
Mhm.
Anyway, hey, Greg. Also, why we're talking about the new school stuff we're seeing, and I get this on the radio, and you being in the older, when things were a little tougher as far as coaches with players, the changes we're seeing on how you can coach guys, and you can't yell at them as much, and you can't be as tough, and asking guys to be on time sometimes.
Right.
What are your thoughts on the changes there?
Yeah, it's all the difference in the world. Jimmy Johnson used to always say, he was harking back to his Cowboys days when he said this, but he said, if the fourth string rookie guard who isn't going to make the team anyway, if he's 2 minutes late for a meeting, his ass is out of there. If
Right.
Troy Aikman is late for a meeting, I'm going to gently nudge him awake and tell him to try to be better next time. Nowadays, what are you going to do if they're late for a meeting?
Yeah.
Every
That's so much
yeah,
fun with it. You can't,
Right.
even Mike.
yeah,
So you can't. I fine him, but there's not enough money to fine him to
Right.
change the.
yeah.
It's just a different. It's just a different type of player. It's a fact. It is what it is.
Yeah,
I don't
and
know.
another change is that a lot of the top players now they look at the traditional media as the middleman that they can cut out.
Right.
So many players have their own podcast or
Right.
report their own news on Instagram, and the idea of athletes needing or teams even needing a press conference to convey information to their fans is outmoded. Because all the teams have their own websites, and
Right.
that's why it's tougher and tougher to do what I do for a living, really, because and I'm glad I'm a columnist and not covering a team full time, because it would be very difficult to work around that lack of access.
Greg, talk about your approach to now you're doing the podcasting stuff, and compared to when you get ready to write an article, the differences you prepare for each one.
Yeah. My joke is that I don't know a ton about every single thing I write, but I have to read like I do. You know what I mean? If I'm writing about horse racing, to use an example, I happen to own a small piece of a racehorse, but by no means am I a horse racing expert. But if I'm writing about horse racing, let's say the Florida Derby, I'm going to do my research. I'm going to come off as if I know a lot about horse racing. I'm going to try to fool the reader. With most things, by now I sort of know it well, but with certain sports like that, you just have to really do your due diligence. It's like, Joe, before you go on the air, I don't know how much work you do. I don't know whether you have like a big yellow legal pad with things you want to talk about. But
I do.
Yeah.
He scribbles. We get on the plane after a game, and he's putting his notes down, and I look over. I can't read a word he's saying.
Yeah.
It's like
That's
hieroglyphics, but he can read it back to himself.
Yeah, that's all that matters. I'm the same way with my pigeon longhand when I'm taking notes, and I still take notes old school. I'll use a microphone if it's an incredibly important or volatile interview, but if it's just a run-of-the-mill interview, I will take notes longhand, and it's just shorthand that I've learned over the years. If you were looking at my notes, you would probably have no idea what I'm writing.
Yeah. So with the change in newspapers aren't going away. They're just not going to be on paper much for any longer. Like I read mine. You know, I swore I used to get up and go to a coffee shop, a Starbucks, or I'd go to a Borders bookstore or something, get a cup of coffee, and grab 3 or 4 newspapers because I swore I would never get away from a paper newspaper.
Yeah.
And read them. And now I'm reading it all on my iPad.
Yep.
And because I can get, when I travel, I can put books on there. I can put, magazines. I can put all my newspapers.
Yep.
And entertain myself that way. But it's different. And how do you go about disseminating? There's all the different ways to disseminate what you're doing. Obviously, there's the newspaper. It's the podcast. It's Instagram, and I don't know how much social media, X, and all those, because the people that are in it, like the younger, I'm not sure how much you are, I'm kind of scratching the surface of the social media side, but the people that grew up with it, they're full blown into it. And so you got to be cognizant of it. And all that information is coming from different, got to figure out, is this really real, or is this, is this some, just someone's opinion, or is it if it's fact? I mean, it's the bushes have got a little deep around the news these days.
Yeah, for sure. You always can't believe what somebody tweets, and there's all these fake accounts now. You'll have the name of an NFL insider, but it'll be misspelled by one letter. Right. So like all of a sudden somebody's reporting that Joe Burrow is being traded to the Browns, and before you run with that, man, you better vet that, because anybody can say anything online under the guise of parody accounts or anything like that. I write for the Herald, and I don't get the Herald delivered on my lawn. I read everything online as well. When I still used to get the newspaper delivered, I remember once having a conversation with my sons. They're 4 years apart. I think at the time they were probably in their 20s, and they're both Marlins fans. That hasn't been beaten out of them yet by an owner who won't spend on players. But so they're big Marlins fans, and they're saying some argument of the day, like the bullpen. They had just signed somebody to the bullpen or whatever, and they're saying, "Dad, what do you think about that?" And I point to the newspaper sitting on the kitchen counter, and I say, "I just wrote about that. Go over there and read what my opinion is."
Right.
And like, they're my sons, they're Marlins fans, but they don't read a newspaper,
Yeah.
And so there's a million different ways to get information. When people associate me with the Dolphins sometimes, the only 2 years I really covered the Dolphins as a full-time beat was 90 and 91. But it was easy back then, because if I was covering a team, I had to compete with the Sun Sentinel and the Palm Beach Post, and that was about it. Right. And local TV, or you'd be out there once in a while, maybe. But now, if you cover the Miami Dolphins as a full-time beat, you're competing with ESPN and all the other major outlets that have full-time NFL writers, and ESPN has a writer covering every team, living down here, going to press conferences. So it's much tougher now. And the news is amorphous, it's just spread all over the place.
Some of those guys, ESPN and the NFL Network, they can walk out of a press conference, and the next thing you know, it's on the crawl on the bottom of ESPN or the NFL Network, like immediately.
Well, NFL Network's going to give their guys, they're going to take care of their guys.
So like we were talking before we get on the deadlines are whenever you get, unless it's something that's, really needs to be on that line. It's just kind of, they're not blurred, but you better get to it quick.
Yeah, because you want to get it online as soon as possible, to compete with TV and other news outlets. But in terms of the print edition, I think our deadline is like ridiculous. It's like basically it's like 6 p.m. So if it's a 1 p.m. Dolphin game, even that's on deadline for me. Because the game's going to end at 4. By the time I get up from the locker room into press box and finish writing, it's 5. The deadline's at 6. So even a 1 p.m. game barely makes the print edition the next day. So that's one of the reasons that print journalism is dying.
Greg, this has been great, man. Can't thank you enough. It's been way too long, even though we all live here in South Florida. Thank you so much for coming on.
I appreciate you guys having me. You guys are local legends. It's true what I say that you guys have reinvented yourself just as I've tried to. And if you love what you're doing, keep on doing it because we only have one ride through this life, so let's enjoy the hell out of it.
Yeah, no,
Right back at you, Greg. We feel the same way about you.
You and I are coming around turn 4 really right now.
That's true.
Down the stretch we go.
Might as well make the best of coming down the stretch.
I'm telling you what, I still feel like I'm middle aged, but then the realization is I'm probably not going to live to be 140. So I'm just enjoying it.
No, that's why when I started this podcast, it was like, it was really around that premise that in my mind I still think I'm 25. My body's telling me that I'm 80, and then I'm trying to keep that body guy out, and then keep that 25-year-old guy in my head. And so
I hear you. I hear you. Yeah,
once we get to a certain age. Like when I was 60, I was still, okay, I'm good. When it's 70, I told someone, I said, they used to tell me that 50 is the new 40, 60 is the new 50, and 70. And when they said 70, I said, bullshit. 70 is 70. Don't give me any crap. 70 is 70.
Believe me, when I'm sitting on the floor doing a crossword puzzle with my granddaughter, the mere act of getting up from the floor isn't as smooth.
That's reality.
Just bring Grandpa some pillows. I'll just stay right here.
Yeah, there you go.
Greg, thanks, buddy.
Thanks a lot, man.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks.
So I don't know about you, but I think we may have gone a little overboard with like the old stories and back in the day. But when you get somebody on like that's been around and we've known for such a long time, and I think we both respect him what he does. It was fun having him on.
Greg has been part of our life since we got here, since we both got drafted here. He's also been here going through a lot of the same things, and we've been in sports, all of us together. And it's great to hear all the stories he has and things he's been through. Yeah,
because, those guys, no matter what you hear from them or you talk, they've always got a little insight. They always got some little tidbit that they don't let go. And when you hear them, it's a pretty good story.
And they deal with big personalities. When you start talking about Don Shula and Dan Marino and Pat Riley and all the great coaches and players that we've had here in South Florida.
Look, it hit me right in the heart when we started talking about boxing because I grew up loving boxing, and to be able to be here and watch those
70s and 80s. I remember
Aaron Pryor and Alexis Arguello
great
in
fights.
The Orange Bowl.
Oh my God, great!
I mean, some of the fights that we saw down here were amazing. So it's just nice to have a guy like Greg and doing. Hey, I want to remind you guys. I think when I do that, I always pound this. So whoever's complaining about me pounding it, I'm gonna stop pounding it anymore. I'm trying. Well, let's not put it that way, but. So look, hey, if you want to listen to us, we're on all the platforms: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeart Podcast. You can catch us on YouTube TV, and you can check out our Scales sponsorship going strong.
Shirts are great.
Look, hopefully we need to get another sponsor on here on the other side, moving on. But everything's going good, and we're glad the support that you guys give us is fantastic. I think we're going to try to find some way to get on our email account where we can kind of get you some swag or something and some mugs or something.
You've been teasing people about that.
I know, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to do it. You'll see. We'll do it soon. Hey, thanks for watching us. We'll see you next time. Stay out the pasture.